Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, episode 113. We're coming to you from Boynton Beach, Florida. I'm sitting in the FM Tennis Performance Center. Tonight, we're going to talk to Jim Klein, longtime student. So many things to touch upon. One is to really thank Jim. He spearheaded the effort to have Vic Braden nominated into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. He's right up there as far as who's the number one fan of Vic Braden. Another thing is, Vic called me up. I want to bring this up to Jim. And Jim was in Western PA teaching, and Vic was going to be in the Philadelphia area, Doylestown, where Jim is based, and has been for a long time. And Ed Mullaney, Jim will straighten me out if I make any mistakes, Karen, his wife. So Vic was looking for someone to help him run a traveling clinic. And Jim Klein was available, so I called up Jim. And I remember that he was like a 4 or 5 day experience working with Vic. And the owner of the club, Ed, offered to pay Jim, and Jim said, no, I'm doing this as a volunteer. Love of the game, respect for Braden, and what a educational experience. But anyway, long story short, all these years have gone by, and now I think all young people in tennis should know that sometimes you have to give to get, and now Jim is one of the owners of the club. But many things that we can talk to him about, the longevity of his pro staff. But let's get him on the phone, if I can do that, as always. See if we can go mistake-free with our phone.
I'm here, Steve.
Jim Klein, welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. Thanks for being a guest.
I'm grateful to be here.
No, I was just telling a few things about your background. We'll catch up with that as we get going, but we usually start with your story. But I mentioned the longevity of your staff, you working as a volunteer and now being an owner of the club, the Vic Braden Hall of Fame. So I want to touch upon those things, but I've known you since you were 18 or 19 years old, and that wasn't yesterday.
That is true. That was back in, I think I met you in 84.
And you came to the Tennis Tech program right out of high school, correct?
I did. I saw the little ad in the back of Tennis Magazine, and I showed my father, hey, I want to do that.
I had a chance to meet your father. We can go through some stories with your dad about the one where you have to go buy a wristwatch.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
You remember well.
I have total recall. I recall totally what I want to. No, for our listeners, Tennis Tech was a 2-year program. Unfortunately, it's no longer in existence. It was at Tyler Junior College, Tyler, Texas. I was there throughout the 80s. And when you came in, the program was very large by the time you came.
Yeah, it was definitely in full swing.
And I remember you walking by in the hallway, and I said, hey, Klein, what time is it? And of course, I knew you didn't have a wristwatch on. And I believe you could set the story straight, that we had a lab where you had to come in and you as a student had to organize well over 100 people. It could have been 100+ Tennis Tech students, a PE class or two.
Correct.
Might have been a community clinic at night where we had 80+. But if you didn't have a wristwatch, I said, got to reschedule. Do you remember that? What part of that story do you remember?
Oh, I remember going out the same day and going to, if I remember right, JCPenney's, and I bought a wristwatch.
No, I think what happened was you called your dad up. And
you're talking that part, yes.
But no, your father gave you the advice, I think you need to go buy a $10 wristwatch.
That's exactly right. You're right, 100%.
Yeah, it's funny. But no, how did you get excited about tennis before the age of 18? I mean, how did you come to that point where you wanted to make a career out of it?
I came from a little town in Colorado that no one's ever heard of, not in the mountains or anything, out in the flats. And my karate instructor asked me one time when I was 14 years old, hey, do you want to go play tennis? And when the karate instructor asks you if you want to go do something and you're 14, you go, hey, that's pretty cool. And I went out and hit tennis balls with him. And I discovered that this was the greatest thing I had ever done. And from that point on, I would literally live on a tennis court hitting on a backboard for hours and hours.
Excuse me, what was the name of the little town in Colorado?
It's called La Junta, Colorado.
So it's a long ways away from the mountains?
It's a long ways away from the mountains. You can see Pikes Peak in the distance on a clear day, but it would take you a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get there. We were down in the southeast corner.
It's always interesting. To ask somebody how many people live in a small town. You ask somebody from New York City, I mean, they think Syracuse is a small town. What about your small town? How many people?
We had less than 10,000, and we were the big town in the county.
How many traffic lights? That's quite a few traffic lights.
Oh, probably 5, 6, something like that.
Yeah, I grew up in a town with 2 traffic lights.
Yep.
So then you played high school tennis?
I did. The team wasn't that good, but no team there was good. There were no such things as an indoor tennis court. That would have been up in Colorado Springs, places like that. So, again, how I got to you and where I am now is still quite a mystery in many respects.
Well, you certainly were in a position where you could improve your playing skills. All the tennis tech students, we would have pre-post film of you from 1984, 85, and all your classmates. We go back that far with pre-post videos.
I have brought many students to you over the years. I followed you back to Texas, Rochester, Memphis, Florida, and you have embarrassed me with that video on more than one occasion to my students.
Why was it embarrassing? You didn't hit the ball perfectly? Come on.
Well, you're 18 years old and you're looking at yourself going, oh, that's just embarrassing.
Yeah. It's seems like yesterday. And how old are you now, Father Time?
56.
56, a career in tennis. What a journey. So tell us, you were at Tennis Tech. What would you share with the audience with that experience? I know that the USTA has the USTAU University Department, and there's efforts being put forth. I know there's Methodist, there's Ferris State. All the enrollments, Tennis Tech, as I mentioned, has dropped. It's really too bad. But what comes to your mind? A couple learning points from that.
Well, the first thing would be just the discipline that you gave us. You were only 10 years older than I was at the time, and I never realized that until years later. And you're working with a lot of guys who, egos, and they think they know what is what, and just the discipline that you brought to us, the collared shirts, the wristwatch. I don't know if you remember, you kicked me out of class once for not shaving, and that was a lesson. I wasn't the happiest person in the world, but that was a lesson. So definitely the discipline would definitely rank up there. Obviously, the information, the technical skills, and things like that come to mind. You made it a great program. It still needs to be there. Unfortunately, it's not. Yeah,
the shaving now, it's fashionable. It's A-okay for someone not to shave. But I remember John Verdi, a salesman who had his own stroke master, his own tennis company, produced ball machines, manufactured ball machines. And he used to tell us that as a tennis pro, 24/7, you're on call. You got to run into people at the grocery store here, there, and everywhere, and you don't need to look like you just got back from a 4-day fishing trip. But yeah, I one time had the West Point tennis team spend their spring break based at our tennis program in Florida, and the cadets, the players, the team, West Point team, they didn't shave, and the coach made them dry shave in the parking lot, and just told them they were disrespectful to Coach Smith. That you need to shave in the parking lot, no water. The discipline making people. You wore a uniform, but Dr. Eugene Allen had set up a program for dental hygienists, and that I was only 26 when I started that program, but the that program was very professional, and you had to have your Tennis Tech clipboard, and you wore a collared shirt and a Tennis Tech sweatshirt, and nothing that was expensive, but as the days gone by. With the technical side, we'd have a different speaker come in every month. What recall do you have for some of the speakers that came in when you were there?
Well, I mean, Jim Lair was there, Dennis Vandermeer, Peter Burwash, PBI was there, Peter Burwash International. I don't know if Vic ever came there, but I know we went to see Vic somewhere at one point at Texas University or something like that.
Well, what happened, Vic, like Jim Lair and others, Peter Burwash, they came in every year. They used to let us set up the outline. It was a fantastic weekend with that organization. But if someone came in every other year, we had Jack Grappel on as a guest. He didn't come in every other year, but
Yep.
you know, it was that way. Every student would be exposed to the, someone like Braden, Vandermeer. With the local pros, it just didn't work out. It was two factions. You were either for us or against us, and I didn't realize it at the time. But starting the program at 26, I was really breaking a monopoly. The town was really controlled by a couple of brothers, and not that that's wrong, but we had our dollar clinic, our community clinic on Tuesday and Thursday nights. And so the local pros were always invited, no charge, to come and listen to Vic. There was actually a gal by Sally Fisher. She had been to the Vic Braden Tennis College, and I met her when I was there because I worked there before I went to Tyler, Texas to revise his curriculum. And Sally, every high school coach, every college coach, every club pro, she was very well off, and she offered to pay expenses, flights, hotels, everything to go spend a week with Vic.
Wow.
And no one took her up on it. And then when Vic would come to town, the local pros wouldn't come listen to him, free of charge. And so I remember Robert Rhodes was the president of a tennis and swim. And he called me up and said, "Hey, Vic Braden's coming to town. Can the pros come?" I said, "I've invited him every year. And this is Vic's third or fourth time here, and they don't show." I said, "So from what you're saying, it just it rings loud and clear, is that we took Vic Braden to Texas A&M because I went there once a year to train PE teachers. So Vic came in to Tyler, maybe it was Wednesday night, and he spent Thursday and Friday morning, but we didn't have pros coming in from Dallas and Houston and all over that part of the country. What we did is had everybody go to Texas A&M. And one story is I had a do's and don'ts show. Clayton Stanley ended up playing at the University of Texas. His parents both went to Texas. We had him wearing Texas A&M clothes, demonstrating strokes properly, efficiently, and we had him wearing Texas clothes, doing it the wrong way. Like he had a big cowboy hat on, and shoes were too big for him. You probably remember that slideshow.
I remember Clayton well.
So the first time, he was the first guinea pig of tennis tech. So the first time we went to A&M, I was just there with some of the tennis tech students, and the Aggies were doing their spin and they're kicking their heel and what they do when their football team scores a touchdown. That's when you're allowed to first kiss your girlfriend, I think, at Texas A&M. But anyway, I told Vic, I said, "This is going to be great." And what a funny guy he was. And on the Friday night, all the PE majors had to be there. So it was a large auditorium and, well over 300 students. I would guess closer to 500. Now, on the weekend, it was their option who wanted to come out and be part of the Vic Braden Clinic. But he was there when you were there. But then I know that you obviously did things with him out in maybe Utah or California, or both.
My first experience really with Vic in a more of a intimate setting, because I'd only met him with a crowd of people. He couldn't have picked me from a lineup. Was in 1995 when he was doing his traveling tennis college, and he came to what I'm at now, the Doylestown Tennis Club.
That was Ed, Mulaney, and Karen, right?
That's right. And again, I did not know Ed. I didn't know Karen, but Vic needed some extra pros. And you knew that I was in the area in Pennsylvania, And so through your connection, I got, Vic actually called me. I remember how nervous I was that day. Oh my gosh, Vic Braden's calling me and asked if I could be there that weekend. I said, absolutely. And I figured my job when I got there, I told Ed Mullaney when I first met him, I said, look, I don't expect to be paid. I just want the opportunity to listen to Vic. I'll set the chairs up. I'll take them down. I'll clean the courts. Just let me hang around this guy. And that was my first experience with Vic.
No, I remember that time you were in Western PA, and not everything goes right. You had an owner that you guys didn't click, and you were there for several years, and then I was calling you the Mad Marine. You weren't teaching for a short period of time, and you got super, super fit. Remember that?
That is exactly right. Yep, I was there for 8 years at that club in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and I don't know. God was looking out for me, and I got to Doylestown, and I haven't left. Been here for 27 years.
27 years. So then, Ed was just impressed with the fact that you were in love with the game and had so much respect for Braden that he brought you back in to be the tennis director. Is that right?
That basically that is the right idea. Steve, Ed and Vic knew each other for probably 10 years and had great respect for each other. And Ed had always wanted a Vic Braden teaching pro. And when I came in, I was there for the weekend. And again, I figured that I was just going to be a grunt on the court feeding balls. And I remember Vic coming over to me and asking me, well, what I would like you to do. And the only reason I think he did this is because he knows that if Steve Smith trained a pro, you probably can have confidence that that person can do something. And so Vic asked me to run the upstairs part of the program. And that was all of the video analysis for 2 days. I never even got on the court. It was just video analysis. They would video on the court. We had 2 large groups of people, and they would rotate through. And I found myself running the upstairs program. And I was actually nervous as can be, and was blown away that I was given that responsibility. But I remember the first part of the video session, I turn around and Vic is standing in the back of the room, and he's listening to me. And for the next 15 minutes, to this day, I tell the story and I go, I can't remember what I said. I could have been talking about anything but tennis, and what I still do not know. I became so nervous that Vic Braden was listening to me that I just blanked in my head for that 15 minutes. So, but from that weekend, I hit it off with Ed really well, and we talked tennis in the future, and he offered me a job, and it never left. So,
oh, it's interesting with Vic, such an easygoing guy. I one time was at a USPTA conference with Vic, many times, but it was in at the Colony in Sarasota, and I kind of grabbed him and said, Vic, let's go. Because people would just come up and talk to him, but I said, let's go listen to this lecture. And I'm one of the most confident speakers of all time, Bill Tim, the voice of the USPTA, and have all sorts of positive things to say about Bill Tim. What he'd done for tennis. He was an excellent player, excellent teacher, great command of a group. So anyway, when Vic walked in, I could just tell that Bill Tim was like, well, Vic Braden's in the room. Whoa. Because most insiders knew that he knew. One time at the Roosevelt, New York City Tennis Teachers Conference, I was with Vic, and he was scheduled to speak after Arthur Ashe. And of course, he knew Arthur Ashe really well. And a few years after that, he made a video, an educational tape that people could find on YouTube with Stan Smith and Arthur Ashe. And both those guys, I think most touring pros are comfortable in their own skin. I mean, those guys kept saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So in New York City, Vic was asked if he could hang around and speak later after Arthur had a late start. So Arthur was going to be 40 minutes late. So I said, Vic, come with me. And we hid behind a column in, it's a large conference room where they had a modified tennis court set up. And, Vic was behind because I wanted Vic to be in the room where no one saw him. Because if he was in the room, people were smart enough, Arthur Ashe, a very, very smart guy, he would have just had a conversation with Vic. And when it really came right down to it, what a classy guy. But Arthur, it's one of those things with players, they don't know, they don't know. And Vic would just say, poor Artie, that's not right. That's not right. And then a couple of years later, they had this opportunity to make a video together. But, I think that's like asking someone plays the saxophone really well, say, how do you hit that one note? I always say, if you want to learn how to play a saxophone, find a really good instructor. If you want to be inspired, go to a really good jazz concert. And but yeah, Vic, I could see where it make you nervous. But if people got to know him, it would be just the opposite. I mean, it'd be very, very easygoing. I tell this story all the time where I was in Colorado actually, where he had a ski school, and I remember telling a student to block the ball and return serve, which I think you still can do when you're teaching people. Okay, it's like initially line the racket up, block the ball, just from a stage development, what you would do with some beginners. But I remember Vic just saying right there, no, Steve, don't ever tell anyone to block the ball. You need to counter speed with speed. But he was just so open like that. It was not a matter of, any, he wasn't pretentious. There was nothing false about Braden. So shortly after that, you started at Doylestown?
Yeah, I went home, packed up, and I started in May of 95.
Oh, so you came back right away?
Correct. Yep. I think the tennis college was in April, end of April, and I was back, I think, on May 15th. I think it was Mother's Day, if I remember right.
Why didn't paint a picture for us? Doylestown, where it's located north of Philly, and what your complex has as far as number of courts and such?
Yeah, we're an hour from Philly, Bucks County, PA. It's a beautiful area, Doylestown, Pennsylvania. It's where the courthouse is, so everything has kind of grown up around this area. The club started in 1973. Ed Mullaney started it from scratch with his partner, Dwayne Murner. And when I got it there in 95, there were 4 outdoor courts, 8 indoor courts. They started with 6 indoor courts. And the second year, they realized they had something, so they tore down the wall and put up 2 more courts. So there were 8 courts, and we've been that way ever since.
So 8 indoor and 4 outdoor?
8 indoor, 4 outdoor. And we've got a training center at the end where our tennis mates sit. We've got 25, 30 feet of mirrors where the kids can shadow swing in front of the mirrors. We've got a private hitting lane where you can go back and hit tennis balls. It's kind of like the Braden tennis lanes. We don't have self-feeding like Braden had, but it's kind of set up with that same idea.
No, I remember being there. It was some time ago, but I taught there a few times. With anything as far as the clubhouse, you have any fitness, any gym, any?
No, we are strictly tennis.
And how's that sit today with pickleball and some of the other upcoming activities?
Yeah, pickleball is a juggernaut, as I say. 5-6 years ago, I kept having members who were snowbirds. They would go down to Florida and come back, and they would tell me about this game, pickleball. And I was like, I really didn't pay attention for the first couple of years. And they kept mentioning it, and I said, okay, I got to look into this. And when I looked into it, I was like, holy cow, this has actually got something. And we have started pickleball here at the club. Outside of that, it's strictly tennis, and 90% of what we do is tennis. But the pickleball part of it is well received, and there are a lot of people playing pickleball. We have members who play both tennis and pickleball.
So did you convert any of the tennis courts, or were there permanent pickleball, or?
No, we don't have permanent pickleball. We've got the really nice nets on wheels that you can roll out, and we've got the blended lines on the tennis court. And for the most part, pickleball players at that time, they just wanted a place to play. That was their biggest challenge, finding places to play. Now there are places that are popping up all over that are dedicated to pickleball, but we haven't gone that route. No, we're so full tennis. We are literally packed from 7, 8 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. We probably run occupancy of probably 80% on a given day, sometimes more.
And how big is Doylestown?
Doylestown, there are so many little places around it. I mean, you're pulling from 100,000 people easy Doylestown itself is probably 30,000, 35,000, something like that. I haven't looked in a long time. But everything is just grown together. So as soon as you leave one place, you're entering another little town or another suburb, something like that.
What I'm telling people in tennis now with pickleball is you can't beat them, join them. It's such a force.
It is a force.
And, the people that are going to be the best pickleball players, would you agree that it really helps to have a very solid tennis game to be a proficient pickleball player?
Yeah, our 4045, pickleball or tennis players can walk out on a pickleball court and play very solid pickleball once they know the rules. It's an easy switch.
Yeah, I just told one negative is you can't close in because of the kitchen, and then your swing volleys become a dominating force versus a conventional volley. Does that sound right?
I agree with you 100%. We have actually gone down with the pros and played pickleball without the kitchen. I think it's more fun.
With Dave Fish, former Harvard coach, he introduced me to the people with spec tennis, and the term bridge sport goes back to, the sport that Bobby Riggs, Pancho Gonzalez, Thea Gibson started, where you just take a wooden mallet and it's perforated, you puncture a tennis ball. A bridge sport meaning that if you play with that, you play with a spec racket, it's going to help you develop tennis strokes. But then the point being that if you are playing pickleball with a pickleball racket, you won't necessarily, it's not a transfer skill. You're not going to be learning tennis skills if you just pick up a...
Oh, I agree. I think tennis goes to pickleball. Pickleball doesn't go to tennis.
Say that again?
I said I agree. I think tennis transfers to pickleball. Pickleball does not transfer to tennis.
Yeah, that's well put. I haven't heard that. What about the fees? I mean, pickleball is not as expensive. I mean, how do you work that as a club owner?
When I first got into this, I discovered, I don't want to offend any pickleball people who might be listening, but pickleball players are very cheap. And I was told this from the very beginning, that they're not going to pay a lot for the privilege of playing pickleball. And it really was true. We had to do the price structure where we would like to get 8 people on one court. The way we set it up, we can a pickleball court on each, 2 pickleball courts on one court, one tennis court. And if we can get the 8 people out there, then we can do fine. We're doing okay. But if it's 4 people, then it definitely is not as profitable.
Well, of course, you have the weather, inclement weather, so that's working for you. So here in a place like Florida, obviously people know they have to pay for heated and lighted space, correct?
Right. They do understand that, but it's been very difficult to get the cost of pickleball up. We've done it a little. A couple other places around are bumping it up as well, but it's still not tennis. But those same people who are playing pickleball play tennis. Very interesting.
Well, our listeners, obviously I've been in the lane of teaching and coaching for so long. I know when we first connected, we studied camp and club management, pro shop management, tried to do the very best we could with all the offside, or I should say off-court aspects of the profession. Tell us a little bit about membership. How does that work with pickleball and tennis membership?
So we have 2 different memberships. We've got the tennis side and the pickleball side. So if like most places, if you're a member, then the cost is less for you per hour or whatever you're doing. If they're not a member, there's going to be a non-member fee.
And what about lessons? Do people take a lot of pickleball lessons?
That's a great question. We are just now getting into the pickleball lessons. For the first 3-4 years, we've just focused on getting pickleball in the areas where court time wasn't being sold, but that's been very difficult because we sell a lot of court time. And just now we are starting to look into lessons. We've got a lady who is a former member of the club here who also teaches pickleball in Naples. And she's going to be doing some pickleball clinics for us this month, in fact.
Years ago, I just Chuck Gill. I ran into Chuck. He's been in tennis forever. Everybody loves Chuck Gill. He was president of USPTA. I know he has been in leadership roles, serving as board members, whether it's Florida or perhaps the national. I'm not sure, but he used the word casual. It's such a casual sport. It reminded of tennis in the '70s. Do you use the same scoring format where people rotate in and they play to 11? How's that work? Or they play in set foursomes?
Right. With the casual part of the sport, I do agree with him, but I made an observation a couple of years ago that the casualness of the sport is going to start to disappear as more and more pickleball places come up and more places for people to play. Because in the beginning when we did this, you could have advanced pickleball players on the court with low intermediate, and they were just hungry to play. But now that more pickleball courts are coming up in this area, the leisure part of it is not as much. It's now becoming more competitive. Players want to be on the court with like players. So it used to be you could have 6 pickleball courts, 24 places for people, and you could have 35, 40 people out there, and they were rotating. And now that's starting to disappear. Now you're getting groups of players who are at this level, groups of players at that level. They don't want to do the rotations. So as more pickleball courts come up, it becomes more like tennis, where 4-5s want to play with 4-5s and 4-0s want to play with 4-0s. They don't want to play with 3-0s.
I'm in a park every day. I live, really a couple golf shots from a large park with 65 acres. And I understand that you just get in line and you play to 11. And there's no one running it. It runs itself. And it's just phenomenal how it's working right now. But I have heard that people now are, not to use the word cliquey, but it's like, okay, I want to play with higher level players instead of just play with anybody.
I could not honestly tell you what the scoring system that they use for the rotations. I've never been on the court long enough to know.
Yeah, that's all I've been told is you play games to 11 and then you rotate and they have benches on the side of the court, and I mean it's not unusual to have 60 plus people waiting to play. It's like it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing because tennis players would never do that.
Of course, Jan Tiriac, I heard Jan Tiriac, the Romanian, one time say he stopped, and I've never seen anyone be able to control an audience like Tiriac. And one of the lines people had fallen asleep in their chair, and Tiriac quietly said, "To live in Florida, you must be between 65 and dead." But anyway, the demographics, this one park, I mean, it's just here in the last couple months, I've been here a year. And you see younger and younger people coming out to play. But when I first got here, it was just the no hairs and the gray hairs. That was it.
Correct. And we see the same thing happening here. When we first started it, it was definitely the older demographic. But now we're starting to see 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds coming out and play. And I've talked to people; they really haven't capitalized on the kids, the juniors.
Right.
And I know that definitely an area that the Pickleball Authority is definitely looking to get.
Yeah, Eve Kraft did so many great things. He was in charge of education research for the USTA forever, the late Eve Kraft. And she was instrumental in starting the NTRP, the National Tennis Rating Program. And when that was put in place, I believe it was mid-'70s. But it took a while to get to the point where it was so big and it was so successful for adult leagues. But I think the NTRP was, largely responsible for killing the everybody plays everybody. The juniors, the youth versus veteran matches used to be so good. To have juniors, to have a 10-year-old out there playing a 60-year-old, it was just that you just don't see that anymore. So I think
that is something that we still do at the club. I invite the older adults out all the time. And they're very good players, and you got a 60-year-old guy on the court dismantling a 14, 15-year-old on the other side. It can be humbling.
Yeah, we call it the mushroom. The mushroom has got the pot belly. They put the mushroom hat on. They've got the band on their elbow, and they can't hit anything. You know, they can't move. They take 2 steps, and they take the role of the spoiler. They can beat so many juniors that are just one-dimensional, blasting balls from the baseline.
That is absolutely true.
It's a spoiler versus a stretcher. I always talk about Shepard Mead. He wrote the book in the 50s, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. But he wrote a book in the 70s, How to Succeed in Tennis Without Really Trying. And yeah, the spoiler, they're just going to junk ball you. They're going to bring you to the net, throw up the lob. And yes, it used to be tennis was much more local. I was talking to a couple moms earlier today. The USTA at one point, they didn't have level 2s, level 3s. It didn't exist. You just played in your section, and then you had to be ranked so high in your section to get to nationals. But now, it's get your checkbook out, and it's hard with the alphabet soup to keep track of how many different type of tournaments there are. With longevity of your staff, I know you've said you've been there 27 years. That's something that's remarkable that you've had coaches working for you for so long. You talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Ryan Reedy of 2 Minute Tennis, your listeners will know who he is. He was here up until last year in September. He had been here for 25 years.
Wow. And
I had known Ryan. He was 9 years old. So he and I have been together for a very, very long time. Phenomenal coach. I mean, the guy definitely understands his craft.
Yeah,
and then we've got another.
We'll come back to Ryan, but yeah, go ahead. And the other coaches?
Yeah, Corey has actually been here longer than I have been here. He was a junior when I got here. And I used, the higher level players in the program as junior coaches, and have groomed a few of them who've gone on to be teaching pros. And Corey has been here 23 years or 24 years.
You have to remind Corey, Corey Smith, right?
Corey Smith, that is correct.
Just remind him that at one point everybody was named Smith. There was a blacksmith, a goldsmith, a silversmith. And as each person sinned, their name was changed. So the moral of the story is if your name is still Smith, you haven't sinned. So make sure you tell him that tomorrow.
I will definitely. That'll put a smile on his face.
So keep going. You have some others, right?
Yeah, Mary Lou, she's been here 23 years. And then we have Nick Covington. He's really the youngest, and he's been here for 10. And then Sander, who is also a junior in our program. I've known him since he was 14. He's been here 12 years, I believe, coaching on and off for us, and now he's full-time. And then another lady in the program who is a member of the club and has worked at our desk for years. And she started helping us out with our little kids, and she's been around, I think, for 5 years now.
Yeah, Ron, so go ahead.
Well, the reason for the longevity, we treat our pros very well, but really the reason for the longevity is really the advice you gave me when I first got here. And I don't know if you remember what that advice was, but in 95, when I started here, I called you and we talked, and I said, I think we got something here. We can grow the program. It was a very small program, and I'm going to have to hire some teaching pros. And your advice was, hire someone in your own backyard and you'll keep them forever.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. All of the pros that I've hired who are outside the area, I've lost every one of them. I haven't hired that many, but every once in a while I would reach outside the area and they would only last 12 months, never 2 years, 12 months to 18 months, and then they were off doing something else. But all of the pros that I've hired who had roots in the area, that's been the model that I've used since I got here. Advice from you.
With Ryan, though, he was from the other part of the state, correct?
He was in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
But yeah, no, when I was there, a few times I was there to teach way back when. Mary Lou, Corey, and Ryan were there. I believe I met Nick
Correct.
When you brought him to work. You brought a large group when I was doing that project with Tennis Memphis.
Correct.
You used to come and visit in Rochester, New York. I took a job for Tennis Corporation of America, hoping that at that time they had 55 indoor clubs and could, have all 55 clubs, have continuity from one court to the next and get people within a curriculum or on a pathway. But I can remember Kodak was laying people off. I hired a gentleman. He's a 4-0 player. He wasn't very fit. And then I hired a mom who's a beginning player. She became in charge of early childhood development. Then the gentleman who was with Kodak had him going with adult leagues, adult beginners. And at first the pros were like, what are you doing trying to train these two people? And at one time they were both the highest revenue generators. They're generating the most revenue. But I do think when you have people that are, have family ties in the area, that's important.
Sure.
I think also too, why don't you comment on this, is that when you are working in the Northeast and the weather is such, people can't I'll go teach 2 miles down the road and I'll pay less of a percentage, or I'll make a little bit more money per hour. And do you think that is a factor too, where people will stay longer at an indoor club than an outdoor club?
Sure, absolutely.
I think the outdoor clubs, the land of the car trunk pro. Go ahead.
Right. So the agreement we have with our pros is they are here 365 days a year. So they can't go and teach someone else, teach somewhere else. They can't teach outside the club at the local parks or anything like that. And, we give them a home. We give them court time. We make sure that we reserve court time for their lessons. We don't let all of the open court or the season courts encroach on their teaching time. So it's a good relationship between the members and what the pros need, but we always make sure that the pros' needs are met. And so right now, I think altogether we're well over 100 years together.
And with that, because you're so strong with your agreement on forehands and backhands and fact-based instruction,
right,
they can all work in different areas, whether it's your top juniors or your beginners, your adults. That's correct?
Right. All of the pros are trained with Vic's 50 plus years of research, 55 years. They're trained in video analysis. They read the books, all of Braden's books. They watch the videos when they're first here. We take them through the program as a junior coach. For a while there, if you were going to work here, you didn't even give a private lesson for the first year. You got all of your hours through the junior program. And then once you got groomed through the junior program, you understood the information, then you could start doing private lessons.
So in your beginning years, did you have some bad apples that were not on board?
Really did not. There were two guys who worked here, and I think after about 2 or 3 years of me coming, they left. I don't know if that says something about me, but once they left and we got this core group of coaches, we really haven't had any bad apples. Everybody buys into the information. It's hard not to when you hear it and when you hear Vic explain it, and then you see the application on the court and the success. It's pretty easy to buy into the information. If you're going through that and you aren't buying into the information, the information is not the problem. You are the problem.
Yeah, that's well put. I've traveled to work with club owners, and you go in and, of course, they have a big overhead. I'm not talking about the overhead with the yellow ball in the sky, but to pay all the bills, whether it's heat, light, maybe the roof has to be replaced. I mean, on and on and on. What about the beginning years? Did you have, some headaches with that? Where, say, for example, you come in and there's 15-year-old kids and they're very well taught. It's pretty tough to have them go back to the beginning in the same building if they acquired their bad technical base there. Was that something that happened in the beginning?
I'm going to say not so much, and this is the reason why, is I realized, I'd already been teaching for 8 years at another club, so I had some experience coming into this, and I realized that it was more important to educate the parent than it was the player. And if you could do that and you could get the parent on board, then the kid was there to stay. Because then if the kid complained to the parent, and the parent had some education about what you were trying to do, the parent would just look at the kid and go, no, you're staying. No, you're going to do this. So we went out of our way early on to educate the parents as well as the players. It wasn't singular.
And
I think if I had tried to educate the players, it would have been much more difficult.
and to share with the listeners, what are some ideas on how did you educate the parents?
So when I first got here, I probably in the first year, not an exaggeration, I probably did 100 video voiceovers on adults and juniors. And it was just the old way of doing it. I would put the VCR, I would video the player on a VCR tape. I would put the tape in the VCR machine. I would point the camera at the TV, and I would video off video. And that was something that, you had shown us how to do ages ago. But one thing I was there one time, and I think I shared this with you. I had a dry erase marker, and I thought, I wonder if I draw on the screen and I wiped it off. And that was kind of a revelation moment when I realized, oh my gosh, I can draw on the screen. And, now you can just do everything on your phone. And that made it even more interactive with the student you were teaching. But I would do these video voiceovers on the juniors, but I would be talking to the parents. I would use the parents' names, make sure that they were part of this, why we're doing this. And it would take me, no joke, I mean, the video voiceovers, I probably was overkill, but it would take me 2.5 hours to do a video voiceover. And I'd be here.
I remember that. You did an outstanding job with that. Unfortunately, well, let me come back to video. It's unfortunately, too many people that we've trained, worked with over the years haven't done that. And for retention, to keep your students, there's so many stories because of working with video. But let me say this, I think of dry erase markers. I was, for 5 years, I went to Harvard in the summer, the H-bomb, Harvard, wow. And obviously, how do you get to Harvard? Study. For our listeners, if you use, by mistake, a permanent marker on a whiteboard, you just take one of the dry erase markers, go over it, and then it erases like magic. And one time I asked this kid, I said, how's that work? And then he gave me the chemical breakdown. And I said, well, kid, you're a lot smarter than I am, but I mean, the forehand goes high, low, high, and inside out. But back to video, for sure, you make the video. And the nice thing about that, when you first started doing it, you were probably using VHS, right?
Correct. It was VHS.
And you hand that VHS tape, and hopefully both parents watch it. But I think the beauty of that is you're not in the room. So there's no conversation. They have to watch it first and come back and talk to you second.
100% right.
Yeah. No, I have students come up to me years later. You can possibly see them at such and such tournament, and they come up, and the first thing they say is, besides hello, is, I should have changed my strokes. I should have made the changes.
Yep, true.
It's a very, very difficult thing to do, to make changes with footer. Besides video, what else?
Well, the video was the cornerstone. It really was. Plus the information, having all of the pros on the same page, that's huge.
Yeah.
Go from court to court, you're hearing the same information. We have no problem if someone I'm teaching wants to go take a lesson from someone else in the club, hey, go for it. Because I have the respect of the other pros that they're going to give that person good quality information. And maybe they're going to say it in a little different way, get the point across. So none of the pros here get to claim their students as theirs. And, so there's no infighting. The pros know that as soon as they come on board here, and that goes a long ways with the camaraderie of the pros and pros thinking, well, you sold my student. No, I didn't. And just things like that make life at a tennis club much easier.
Oh, it's so great for people to hear. I should have a podcast, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Here's an idea that never came to fruition. But you took the ball and ran with this. Vic Braden, advisor. Vic wanted me to come back and work with him, and I said, this is what we should do, is set up a program, Vic Braden, advisor. and whether it be a YMCA, park and rec, 5-star hotel, is try to have, we're using Vic Braden curriculum, Vic Braden pathway. Vic would be the first one to say there was really no such thing as a Vic Braden method. Galileo and Newton were here a long time before us. But no, I even remember you had a great logo, and you actually, you did that anyway. You said, okay, we're Vic, because he was your advisor. We didn't do anything formally where, it was going to be, people work for three things: recognition, money, satisfaction. Is that, Vic's name was going to be on it. But it was, he was just going through some things with his business at that time. He really wanted to do it, but it never, we just never got the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And it would have been a club, it would have been a business that was owned by the pros. And we to this day still trying to find ways to improve tennis teaching. And I like the term we use, cornerstone, is the Braden information. But could you talk about Vic Braden Advisor? You're still doing that, correct?
We don't advertise it the same way. When Vic passed away, we kind of went away from the name on the brochures and things like that. But we did it for a good 20, 22, 23 years, something like that. And his name was on everything. We would even have, access to Vic if we needed him. He was always gracious with his time. But we called it at that point, and this wasn't even my idea. It was very nice of the Mulaney's to do this. It was the Jim Klein Tennis College, and then underneath it said Vic Braden Advisor. And, Vic's name was still very big back then, and that meant something to people. And the idea of the tennis college, that idea was stolen from the Vic Braden Tennis College. We used his name for years and years, and he came out to us a couple of more times. And it was a great relationship.
Well, that was right on. You guys did it the right way, where I used to say, it didn't work. I mean, John Newcomb tried to do it around the world, and Dennis Vandermeer, Nick Baltieri, and hats off to, obviously legendary backgrounds in tennis. It's taking place now in other parts of the world, say in Asia. A lot of the Spanish coaches have their names. Justine Hennon's tried to do that, have their names on programs. But I've always said that in tennis franchising, it's not McDonald's. It doesn't work. And, it should be, in your case, it should be the Jim Klein Tennis College, Vic Braden Advisor. Sweat equity, it's, to have your name on the program. But just, it was a win-win-win concept. And, I know when Vic passed away, so many people made so many nice comments, but at the same time, some of the people that made the nice comments, that's where, I can bring a dark cloud over some things and go, yeah, but you're the one who said that his work wasn't relevant anymore. And it's always going to be relevant because it's physics. Wasn't that the slogan you had?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all physics. Correct.
It's all physics. Yeah.
Yep.
Physics is not a fad. Physics versus philosophy.
Yep.
You pick up a pen and you drop it, or you let it go out of your hand. Is it going up or down? Tell us about Mike McLaughlin. I guess we could talk about the Hall of Fame first, but don't you have some Vic Braden memorabilia that was just sent to you?
It is right here in the conference room, and I will have to be honest, Steve. I got it about a month ago, and I still have yet to open it. I'm just so crazy busy. I literally will step on the court at 7:00 tomorrow, and I will walk off the court at 6:30, and probably will not even have a break. So at some point, I will get this stuff open. I know what's in it. It's the shape of the swing that Vic had, and we've got some of the equipment that he used with his research, and that was all driven by Mike McLaughlin. So I've gotten to know Mike over the last probably 6 years. Great guy, absolutely a staunch Vic guy. He would have gone to the end of the earth for Vic. Vic getting into the Hall of Fame. Both Mike and I were fortunate enough to be sitting in the audience that day, which was definitely one of the highlights of my tennis career, without question. So,
Yeah,
Yeah, Mike's a great.
for our listeners, Mike was a guest. I was on the staff out in California. When Mike was there. He was on the staff before I was.
Right.
I mean, he sent me a video yesterday. So I'm in constant communication with Mike. Yeah, great guy. The Vic Braden Library, the Tennis Channel was not interested in anything but the film. So I know I was just sent 125 books, and I knew that you had something else sent your way. What are you going to do? You're going to eventually have a corner of have like a display of
Correct.
some of the Vic Braden? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we've got a nice area here in the clubhouse where it's a very big trophy case, and we're going to put the stuff in there that will fit. I want to find a place to display the swing as well. I'm not sure exactly where that's going to go.
With you just mentioned that you still spend a lot of hours on the court.
I love being on the court, Steve. I've yet to wake up and go, hi, I've got to be on the court at 7. I go, I get to be on the court at 7. It's still my favorite place to be. So we've got a great staff here, the best manager you could possibly have. So she takes care of 90% of everything that happens in the day. So even though being the director of tennis / owner, I've got a great partner who's a co-owner in the club. He's excellent. So everything gets done that needs to be done. But yes, I'm still, tied to a basket, feeding tennis balls and trying to make people happier on the tennis court.
I think for our listeners, one thing, if you're well versed in Vic Braden and his work, his contributions to tennis, in a lot of ways, it's not that much work to be teaching tennis. If you have the information, and it's not like you always have to hit off your racket, and it's not a matter of just feeding balls. It's a little bit more of a think tank, and it makes it much easier. I mean, obviously, being indoors, that's a bonus too. You don't have that occupational hazard of fighting the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. If this was outdoors, there's no way I could stay on the court for that many hours. In the summertime, we utilize the 4 outdoor courts plus the indoor courts for our tennis camp. And you definitely feel a difference when you've been outside for 6-7 hours a day. No doubt about it.
Have you expanded and used any tennis courts in other parts of Doylestown or that surrounding area?
We haven't. We've been able to do everything here at the club. So we haven't felt needed to go outside the club.
And are you affiliated with some schools? I mean, how's that work? Do the high schools have their own courts, or they're private schools?
Yeah. In this area, everything's very affluent. All of the schools have their own courts. We probably have, 1, 2, 3, 4 high schools that come to us. Mainly, I mean, some kids will go to other clubs, but for the most part, we've got about 4 high schools and then countless middle schools and grade schools.
With, I guess we could backtrack. Ryan Reedy, I remember you bringing with him many, many times. He was like, wherever you went, he went. And I remember he was very fast. He was very athletic. He hit the ball. Obviously, you taught him to hit the ball. I know you brought me in as a supplemental coach, supplemental teacher. But here's somebody for people who follow 2-minute tennis, is he was interested in teaching and coaching. I mean, he was a very good player. And I remember saying, I know lots of people in college tennis. And does that ring a bell? Does that ring true?
Oh, absolutely. When Ryan got here, we gave him the option of if he wanted to use this as a home base and then go out and play some tour tennis, at the futures level, we gave him that option, that opportunity. And he didn't even think about it. He just said, no, I want to teach tennis.
Yeah,
so,
no,
I love.
He had speed. I mean, he was fast and he hit the ball well. So those are two huge pluses.
He understood the game at a young age. He was quick. He hit a great ball, but his love of teaching tennis was far greater than his love of hitting a tennis ball. He'd rather teach someone an hour than go out and play an hour himself. It would be no competition.
I think coming back to the longevity of your staff, those people follow Ryan. Why don't you talk a little bit about how, like, a forehand's a forehand, and there's definitely a connection between someone in your early childhood development to skill acquisition to tournament prep, that whether it's a 6 or a 16-year-old, you're pretty much telling them the same thing.
We are teaching the exact same information. So from I tell the coaches, I don't need to tell them anymore, but when we're first training them is, yes, we want to entertain the little kids, but we also want to get as much out of them as possible. And that means stroke production. So we're trying to teach the kids who are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old how to hit a ball from the very first day. And, it doesn't always look pretty, but we're definitely out there trying to get the kids to understand that there's a way to hit the ball, even from a 4-year-old. So you gave me good advice, and you give me lots of good advice. And I remember one of the things you told me was and I told this to every pro I've ever trained, is you teach the kids like adults, you treat the kids like adults and the adults like kids.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely true. If there's one thing to take away from our conversation, if you're a teaching pro, is remember that right there. And it will serve you well.
With, not to get too personal, but on the compensation, I think that's one thing where, John Burry, who you remember, used to come in every semester and help us on the business side of tennis and salesmanship. And he used to always say that an assistant pro is a head pro in waiting. And so you have people working underneath you. As far as growth, how does that work? I mean, usually people say, well, you want to make more money, you need more responsibility. And, a lot of people that we've trained, we have a very good track record where they've gone on and they run their own program. Does that ring true to, I mean, is that a challenge where, because, if they're there that long, how much can they really grow financially? How can their compensation improve?
Right. So without getting into the details, so I've done enough research to know what the average pro makes in the country, and we go out of our way to pay the pros. I know what other pros in this area make, and we go. I think for the most part, owners of clubs and teaching pros, they don't necessarily love each other. They need each other. But the owner is usually always the one who's dictating how much the pro is going to make. And they're trying to pay the pro as little as possible so they can pay the bills, and I get that. And we really don't do that. So I could tell you this without getting into the details. Our pros will be in the top 1% in the nation for what they make.
Wow.
So we treat them very well, very well. And that's another reason why they stay, is because they know if they went anywhere else, it would look completely differently. The owners of the club here are not trying to milk the club out of every dollar that they can. The partners, they're fine, and if the club folded tomorrow, the partners in this club would be fine except for me. I would be the one who would be hurting. So we go out of our way to treat the pros very, very well. With
a classmate of yours, someone who's been a guest on the podcast, Dave Anderson, he runs Brookhaven. He runs the 20 plus pros, whatever they have. They have Dave Ware, who does the leagues and the socials, and there's obviously so many things where it's like a small city with, I think, 40 tennis courts. And again, he's had people like Dion Krupe, who also a PA guy who Pennsylvania, who's been there a long, long time. So he has definitely had like people like Tim Adams, people who've been there a long time, put a lot of years in. But I find that too many people, they don't stay long enough to really learn. I mean, so but your situation would be so different. But how long you would think for a pro to come in? So you hire a new pro tomorrow. How long would you like to have that pro before they go out and run their own program? My point being, I think people leave too early.
Oh, I agree. They leave much too early. But again, in my situation, we really haven't had too many people leave. We've had John Trimp. I would have no problem mentioning John's name. He's a good guy. He was here for, I think, less than 2 years, probably about 18 months. And I got it. He was a personable guy. He loved the Vic Braden information, but he wanted to run his own show. The day he told me he was leaving, I totally understood that. And went down to North Carolina and he set up shop down there and did well, ran several clubs down there. So, but overall, the pros here, they're just treated with a lot of respect. Any of the pros can run the program. Not any one pro runs the program. I run the program less than anybody. And I tell the pros, look, please understand, I realize I'm not the face of the tennis program at the Doylestown Tennis Club, especially with the juniors and things like that. I'm out there less than anybody. So all of the pros here know that they can run any part of the program at any time. I make sure that they rotate around, so it's not one pro always running with the higher level players and one pro does the lower level players. Everyone, it's the community. Everybody gets a shot at working with everybody. And everybody likes working with everybody. I mean, you've got all the pros that like working with the little kids and all the pros that like working with the more advanced kids. So we go out of our way to make sure that the pros don't feel like they are stuck in one area. So they have a lot of say in the program. I don't even tell them how to run it. I say, look, you can run this. I have faith in you. Go out and run it. So they're very independent, even though they're part of a club community, teaching community, and within the club, but they are still very independent.
No, I like the idea of training a pro as a floater. In other words, they can float from. I mean, if you want them to, work the ladies team, go watch a ladies match. I mean, then they should be able to do that. That's
100%.
Whether it's working with beginners or working with advanced players, it's like, no, it's all one. But
all one.
It's I don't really like the idea that it happens so much because while you're a really good player, and because you're a really good player, you can you're just going to specialize and work with the really good players. I mean, that's just crazy, but that's very, very common. The with compensation, I know Ed Mullaney, I think the late Ed Mullaney, Vic Braden reached out to him for financial advice. Do you help pros with what to do with their money, or is that something you don't do? I know a couple clubs do that.
The only thing I do is there's a gentleman in the club who I have a lot of respect for, and I've had pros come to me about financial matters and their future, and I go, you know me well. I teach forehands and backhands, so this is out of my league, but here's a number, and give this guy a call, and he's a member of the club here, and he's going to help you out. And he's taken the phone call every single time.
Oh, that's great. I know the IRS, I believe it's 20 points. It's kind of a gray. It's not so much black and white. The principles of, are you an employee or are you an independent contractor? Are you pros? Which one are your pros?
So we are all employees now. Up until, I think it was 2019, we were independent contractors. And it wasn't the federal that came in. It was actually the state that came in and audited Ed and Karen. I think it was 2019. Might have been a little bit earlier than that. They audited. It was a nice audit. It was not scary or anything like that. But they basically just said, your guys are not independent contractors. And that changed everything overnight.
And how did that change things?
Well, I mean, you go from you're paying all of the taxes yourself, and now the club is sharing in that burden. And the pay structure changed a little bit as well, because the club just can't take on all of that by themselves. But the Mullaney's were very fair about it, and the new owners have kept with that as well. So, but yeah, we went from independent contractors for 23 years, I think it was. And then pretty much overnight, we were employees.
And what about benefits? I mean, what do you do now that they're employees?
So with a club this size, we don't have to give benefits. And so what basically we have said is, look, we're going to pay you so well that if you want to go out and get insurance, you get to pick what you want. You don't have to get stuck with the insurance that we're going to pick, and you have to participate in it. We're going to pay you well enough that you can go and get your own policy and the pros have no problem with that. Because, I've got pros on the staff who are still in their 20s, and they're looking at me going, look, health insurance for me is basically nothing. Pay me well, and I'll go buy my own health insurance. That's how I did it for my entire. In fact, I still do that. I still cover my own health insurance.
How many years? How many years you been teaching tennis now? You started at 18, basically, so 56.
At 18, 56, so
a few years.
40 some years, almost 50 years.
With circling back to Ryan, tell the listeners about 2-minute tennis. Obviously, it's pretty much a force in tennis. I did a training session the other day for Brandon Flanagan at one of his facilities. Brandon he's the FM and FM tennis. And somebody mentioned the birthday cap, and
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about 2-minute tennis.
So Ryan had been working on different avenues outside of just being on the court. He tried different things, an email service where people would pay a monthly fee, and he just kept working it like you got to do anything. You're not going to be successful overnight. And he just kept working it. He kept studying, kept asking questions to people who were already doing these types of things. And finally, he I wouldn't even say he stumbled on it. He didn't. He worked it. And finally, he decided that the best approach and the one that was going to work best for him was having a YouTube channel. And he came up with the concept, 2-minute tennis, which was, I think it was brilliant. Fast-paced society. Everybody wants everything quickly. The idea of 2-minute tennis, it speaks for itself. You're not going to have to be there for 5 hours listening to him. And granted, not every video is 2 minutes. I get it. But the idea is it's a quick learn. It's valuable information. And he started working it as the same time he was on court. And then eventually, like I said, a year and a half ago, he came in, and it was a very sad day. I'll tell you, I had tears in my eyes when he told me that he would be leaving at the end of summer. And that was last year. And he's done nothing but grow and grow and grow his channel. I think at one time he was the fastest growing tennis instruction channel on YouTube, and could still be. And I'm pretty sure I remember that at one point.
But also, too, is he's had to persevere. I think it was Instagram where he was penalized. He was reprimanded and penalized. And could you talk about that a little bit? He had to start all over again.
Yeah, no, Ryan would tell you that story in a heartbeat. He'd want other people to know it just so they wouldn't make the same mistake. So Ryan was on Instagram, had a lot of followers. I want to say like 80,000 followers. And he was using video, if I remember correctly, it's been a while, that wasn't video that he had authorization to use. And Instagram slapped him and said, don't do it again. And he really didn't think that they would do what they said. He, if my memory is correct, Ryan can maybe someday correct me if I'm wrong, but he did it again, and they just shut him down. Boom. They just hammered him. So from that point on, he had to start all the way over. And I remember him owning it. He didn't cry about it. He was like, yep, I took the chance, and I gave, credit to the people that I used it from. And I think it was CBS, NBC, something like that, footage that he shouldn't have been using. And he owned it, and he started over again. And probably that incident is what led him towards the YouTube channel. So the YouTube instruction.
Well, with the services, coming back to the videos that you make, or that you've made for years, and how that happened, how I started doing that. In our podcast, we've talked about my background in video. I was from a small town, like you were, and very successful high school coach. And once I was in grade 7, and you're not in a permanent classroom, you go from class to class. I had 3 on a Monday. I would watch the high school football on a sequence analyzer. The coach was a PE teacher, and he would during every period. So PE on Mondays, you would watch the film of the football game because that's what he wanted to do. But I would go during study hall, because if you had a certain average, you could sign out of study hall. And then I would do it during my lunch period. So I'd watch that game 3 times backwards and forwards. No, you wouldn't see the whole game, but whatever he was showing in those 45 minutes, mistake correction. And I love the football mentality for that, where every high school team, by law, they basically have to send their film to the next team they're playing. So it used to be, the one high school would get a pickup truck and they'd bring their equipment and they would go to the town where they're going to play the next week. But they cut that out and say, okay, we'll film our game and then you film your game. And there's a famous story from Don Shula. He was the first guy the coach of the Baltimore Colts and then the Miami Dolphins, that at a hotel he would rent the top floor of an indoor parking garage. Want no cars there, and they would, the night before the game, for 3 hours or whatever the stories are, the offensive team would go one way, the units, the defensive team one way, and the special teams, and they would just go through plays in their blue jeans or whatever, go through play after play. And but that's with video, it's just so powerful and it's amazing. Now everyone's got a video camera, their telephone in their pocket, and they're still not using it. Go ahead.
No, that is what's absolutely amazing. When I get players from other clubs, and back in '95, within the first year, we put cameras on the court, camera overhanging the court, and we could video the court. We'd walk back in a little classroom that went back in the video training center. So we've been doing video forever, and I get it. Most clubs didn't have something like that, but you've got this incredible tool in your pocket. And when I get pros or players from other clubs and I pull out my phone and I set it up on the court to video them, and I always ask the same question: have you ever seen your strokes? And it's 99 times out of 100, no. Nope, never seen my strokes on video. I go, okay. I just ask. I don't beat up on anybody. I just ask because I want to know. And yeah, we're still in the Stone Ages when it comes to all of this. But if you ask someone who takes a golf lesson, hey, have you ever seen your strokes on video? They're going to go, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that term Stone Ages, for our listeners, that comes from May 10th, 1976, Sports Illustrated. It was an article, Vic Braden, Gideon Ariel. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but we've had a podcast with Gideon. It's amazing how those two help each other out. But back to Ryan, that's a service that he provides. You can send him a film of your forehand or your backhand, and he critiques it, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Ryan teaches people. This is it's grown into another area, another business for him. Is he teaches people all over the world, literally, China, Europe, all over, and people reach out to him. And I've talked with Ryan many times about it, and it's kind of curious to me, and I really haven't been able to understand why. But he gets tremendous results without ever being on the court with the person. And he'll send me the videos all the time, the pre and the post. And we've had conversations about, why are you getting such incredible results? And I've even said, Ryan, you didn't get those type of results when you were on court with someone. And he'll go, yeah, no. And we've kind of tried to figure it out. And I think one thing is, if the person is sending a video to Ryan from another country, they're pretty motivated to get better. And maybe just that tremendous motivation. And not that the people I don't teach aren't motivated, but there's something with this that someone needs to figure out, why such drastic improvements and never on the court with the
Well,
players.
yeah, I think it's great you brought that up. Is one, obviously, Ryan Reedy's an outlier. So he's a young guy. You've known him since he was 9. So, I mean, he's lived it his whole life. Like I was saying, I think he certainly could have played college tennis at a respectable level. But
Absolutely.
It's like, no, my passion. So he's an outlier. He's been doing it forever. But I think it's credibility is part of it too, and motivation for sure. But he's looked upon, which he is, as an expert. And when you're the local yokel, for years now, story of circumstance, I'm working with people who get off an airplane and they rent a car and check into a hotel, and it's like, okay, I was told to come see this old guy. I'm going to do what he tells me. And but I think when you're we've used to share the story years ago. I think it's people don't have a slideshow anymore, but an expert is someone from out of town with a slideshow. I've taught tennis in over 30 countries, and I one time was in Toronto. My kids were playing ice hockey, and as you know, a lot of your classmates, we have students who teach tennis everywhere, and Richard Hernandez made it a possibility. So I go to Toronto, and I was there because my kids were playing ice hockey, but Istvan Toth wanted me to meet with Tennis Canada. I met with a guy named Ari Novak, and Ari, he's still, I believe, with Tennis Canada. He said, well, what you do, Steve, is stereotypical. But I told Istvan, I said, it's not going to work. I said, even though we have better juniors in the country in this program, and we can go show them so many things, I said, I live in Toronto now. I said, I'm not an out-of-town expert. You fly in for a weekend. So it definitely has the credibility factor. And this doesn't apply to Ryan, but I always say that credibility just means you're believable. It doesn't mean you're truthful. But I think a couple of things with Ryan is that he's very likable. I mentioned John Verdi. He would come into Tennis Tech and tell us how to sell. It's kind of like the puppy dog sale. Everybody likes a puppy, but people need to like you too. I know that you're in the Philadelphia area, and I spent a lot of years with Julian Krinsky. We have to get him on our podcast. And the people used to tease with Julian, with the customer was always right. With me, the customer was always wrong. So I've never really been trying to sell anything. But I mean, I can sell. I think people don't think that engineers are great salespeople because they really know the product. They say, I know how this works. But I think being very likable, just like the puppy dog sale. You like the puppy, you buy the puppy. But they like you. So I think that's a big plus. But he's truthful. There's so much bad information. Braden said that the thing about the internet is so much bad information is going out so fast.
Yep.
And I'm sure Ryan could probably give you some stats on the opposition, what competition. I mean, everybody and their brother now has a podcast. Everybody and their brother, sister too, are trying to make it on YouTube. With Andy Fitzell, like you and me, he's really in Vic Braden's corner. He's very close to Vic. I always say no one spent more time with Andy. No one other than Vic's widow, Melody, spent more time with Vic the last 10 years of his life. But when Andy was doing so many things for us, trying to improve tennis teaching, people would just bootleg. They would just copy his content. It'd be interesting to ask Ryan that. So Andy would make a short clip, fun, like boom, 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 and as many as 20 people that and it's hard, I think, with YouTube to even monitor that. And it's fine that they're sharing. That's a positive thing. They're sharing the information, but when they copy it, the level of quality generally goes down. It would be interesting to ask Ryan that. Yeah, I mean, there must be a lot of people copying what he does.
Oh, I would think so. Absolutely. He's got a quality product.
No,
nice compliment.
I think the name, I think how he communicates it so well. He's likable. I do think that it'd be good for the listeners to hear Vic Braden the man and Vic Braden the resource. It's interesting. You said when Vic came to Doylestown, I'm thinking, wow, that changed. Because I did so many things with Vic for years and years, and there was one point when he was, in his, late 70s, 80s. He just stayed in the video room. He spent a little time on the court, but when you first worked for him, he put himself on the court and you in the video room. It's kind of interesting because he was younger then. But Vic Braden, the resource, I worked with Vic where, you go back to the late 70s, 1979. I met Vic, like everybody, via PBS. The PBS, there were 3 TV stations, and there was a 4th TV station. It was fantastic. In the summertime, the finals were on Monday night. And because PBS was nonprofit, there was no commercials. And Vic would do his tennis tips. And, then, I can remember being in the room where the contract was negotiated for Tennis Magazine, where he was on the cover, and at one point, even twice a year, he was a superstar. He was on Hollywood Squares. He was on all the talk shows.
Johnny Carson.
Yeah, with but the point is that Vic Braden, the resource. I had the chance to actually have Vic. I think of a player named Ruben Perchek who just didn't really like the tour, but he hit the ball so well. He spent a summer at the Vic Braden Tennis College, and every evening Vic would come to walk his dogs, and he'd stay for an hour and a half and just help me teach this kid how to hit the ball. But with the resource is, Ryan. I mean, I'm sure he went to Utah or perhaps California with you, or Vic. He met him when he came to PA. But his knowledge of the Braden information, just I try to convey that to the USTA at one time. It's not Vic Braden the man; it's Vic Braden the resource, and the resource should live on. Why don't you comment on that a little bit?
I agree 100% that the resource needs to live on, but not to be negative, but there aren't enough coaches out there who recognize how valuable that resource is. I had the opportunity once to introduce Vic at a dinner, and I opened with the line that people think that Vic Braden is a dinosaur, and I said, well, he may be a dinosaur, he's getting older, but he's the Tyrannosaurus Rex of dinosaurs. And I said, people think he's old school. I said, granted, he's getting older, but if he's old school, he's still the president of the university. And people just don't realize what he meant to tennis. I still don't think they do. I was so much hoping that his library would really go to you. And I know you say that the library is out there on YouTube. You can look up so much of it. But to be honest, I really wish it had not gone to the tennis channel. You've got a great line about Vic where you say he's the Christmas tree and we are the ornaments hanging on the tree. And I just think there are fewer and fewer ornaments. I think I've added to that your line about him being the Christmas tree and we're the ornaments. I think at this point, you're the star on top of the tree because you're the guy who can carry on his legacy more than anyone. And I know you're trying to do that, every day that you're on the court. But the resource, it's you talk to pros about Vic Braden and they just do not understand how powerful this information is. And it's powerful. The USTA, USPTR, or PTR now, the USPTA, and I know PTR is Vandermeer, so you really couldn't do that. But the USPTA, the USTA, they could have done so much more, and they just chose not to. They always put the wrong people in charge. They put the players in charge, and they should put the scientists in charge. The ones who are the 3-5 players really can't do it that well, but know exactly how it's done. So, yeah, I wish the resource was more respected than it is.
Well, there's not many of us left. I mean, I'm in my 60s, late 60s, you're late 50s, Andy Fitzell, late 40s, mid 40s, give or take. He looks a lot younger than he is, but I always like to get in there that we did this podcast together for a long time. I said, Andy, how's it going to work? I got a face for TV and you got a face for radio. But with Daniel Coyle in his book, The Talent Code, you really need to hire people that are 60 and 70. What's going on with elementary schools? Kids being taught to run, or they being taught to throw and catch. And I had a coach just yesterday say, well, 2005. I go, well, what happened in 2005? And he said smartphones. And he said it's just gone downhill since then. With everything a kid. When you and I were younger, cartoons were only on Saturday morning, and if you were busy on Saturday morning with a sport or some other activity, you didn't watch cartoons. But now all you guys do is take the phone out of your pocket.
Teaching.
Go ahead.
They can't agree upon grips. They can't agree upon the basics of basics. Every pro out there, for the most part, wants to teach a TV forehand, and you're not working with TV players. Stop trying to teach TV forehand. Teach a forehand. The forehand they should be teaching, they should teach Chris Everett's forehand. Everybody could learn Chris Everett's forehand. Might not hit as well as she does, but you could learn her forehand.
Oh, especially early on, day one. You're bringing up so many things. Richard Hernandez, the classmate of yours, he was on, and we said, what's one thing that could improve tennis in Canada? And you said grips. we Americans think that so many exciting things are going on in Canada. They do have some hungry immigrants that have done really well, and that's not a result of Tennis Canada. That's the hungry immigrants working really hard.
Right.
I just think fact-based. I did meet with John Embry with the USPTA, classy guy. Don't really know him. My fault. I've been a member for a long, long time, but I haven't been an active member. And he was pre-pandemic, and it was about like, let's have through the USPTA, let's have a Vic Braden reunion, Vic Braden School. Just the test that he had with his academy, the USTA, United States Tennis Academy. I met with the USTA, and I said, let's do a clinic here on an annual basis. And they said, well, we have to charge you for the courts and charge you a percentage. And I said, well, if we were to generate money, we could just give it to his widow. But it's just a matter to keep the torch, keep the flame alive. And,
Sure.
But I did tell John, I said, Mark Twain, I could learn from each and every member of the USPTA, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a small group of people that could answer these following questions. 19.1 degrees, or you spin the racket 8 times, 360 divided by 8 is 45. And just earth-shattering, like really? That the pros don't know. Dimensions of court and physical laws dictate stroke production. But I think someone like yourself, there's so many, this happened with Rob Krychek. He read that Craig Tiley said when Craig became the director of player development in Australia, and I know obviously you spent a lot of time with Craig because he was there when you were there at Tennis Tech. He said it'd take 10 years to develop a network of coaches. And Rob Krychek, he was in a position with a little bit of clout because at that time his son was, either 1, 2, or 3 in the country in the 18s. He won Kalamazoo, so that means you're the national champion. And Rob told the director of player development at that time that I had this network. Paul Rodert, classy guy, also from the Netherlands. His father was a Davis Cup captain. And, but it just didn't work. Paul had 2 of his assistants call and apologize to us that, they thought we came across like, we were telling them what to do. And, they wanted, Paul was interested at that time in me talking to the national coaches. I said, no, that's too much experience, too much ego in the room. Not in a bad way, but it's just like, no, touring pros. A guy that we trained, Greg Lesueur, heard him say one time, when players stop playing, take a sip of water here. When players stop playing and they, losing my voice, and they come back to tennis teaching, and they're, they're presented like, here come 10 8-year-olds. What are you going to do? If you've gone through the juniors and now you played college and you played the circuit a few years, you're used to going down the line, cross court, playing tiebreakers, going to the gym. You have no idea on how to teach 10 8-year-olds coming towards you. But I think that's where, the Vic Braden classroom, hopefully the Tennis Channel, I think their first piece, I saw something just the other day with Tracy Austin, was very good. That was put out by the International Tennis Hall of Fame. But someone really needs to know what's in the library. For example, let's dig through the library and find film which is in there of Vic teaching the Bryan brothers how to hit a ball.
Correct. Yep.
That should be in there. Or the movie Go for a Winner. Every concept in there. It has only a few things have changed. That people are using more I formation and serving up the middle, but Gonzalez was doing that. He a great serve, and he stood into he was doing that. So you can't say, well, so-and-so. It's like everybody's claiming they've invented something. And, I always say it doesn't make any sense for everybody to put in their own 2 cents. But I think that the resource should be a working resource. Coming back to Ryan with YouTube, I've been told this, and maybe we have to embellish ourselves and say, well, we do it well. Here's the point, is that not many people are showing little kids on film hitting tennis balls. People have also, it's like, okay, they're demonstrating themselves, and they're just demonstrating. Well, Vic used to say, the proof's in the pudding. Let me see you hit it. Andy Fitzgerald always says that. Let me just see how your students hit the ball. And you can tell, and you and Ryan Reedy and your staff with such longevity, you can tell in 2 seconds. You watch somebody hit a forehand volley, you just boom,
Yep.
You just see all the flaws, the cause. Diagnostically, why is that ball going, here, there, and everywhere? It's grip, swing, body. But yeah, I think overall, it's beginning adults too. But, one of the reasons that pickleball is growing so fast is tennis is taught so poorly. Racquetball became an official sport in 1968. It didn't really last. And here in Florida, we're blessed with all these 3-wall racquetball courts. And yeah, people come out. There's a few people still playing racquetball. They're all older than I am, pretty much. But they're great backboards. It's a great place to go just hit the backboard. But yeah, you could comment on some of my comments but racquetball, it just boomed because it was easier. Newsweek magazine said, it took an hour and a half to transfer athletic skills to play racquetball, where it took a year and a half to transfer athletic skills to be able to play tennis. But why don't you make a few more comments along those lines with the Braden information?
All the Braden information we use, when we bring it to the adults, you can see the progress pretty quickly. So even though tennis is a little bit more of a long-term sport than a pickleball, with the right information, you get people excited. They start to do better on the court. And in that short amount of time, they start to get hooked on tennis. But you're right. Tennis is so poorly taught that we've lost more people from tennis because of tennis instruction than probably anything else. Because if someone's paying for instruction and 6 months, a year down the line, they really haven't gotten that much better, they're going to start to look to do something else. Right now, I think that void is pickleball. It's so quick you're going to be playing pickleball in an hour and a half.
Oh, Vic Braden, adults, they buy the tennis clothes and then they wear them to the grocery store. It's very, very difficult for entry-level adults. It's like when a little kid, I remember Vic Braden's tennis schools in Germany, Sue and Will Arias, they went over and their young son, their oldest son, he learned German faster than anyone because kids are not afraid of making mistakes. And I can remember him being back, he's like 8 years old and they were using him as a translator in just one setting at the Vic Braden Tennis College. But yeah, no substitute for a good beginning. And I think so many times when people come to us, we have to unteach tennis. It's not a matter of adding anything, it's subtracting. It's like we got to go back to basics. And that's where it really baffles me that fundamentals are just not readily accepted in tennis all these years later. And I think it's getting worse. What are your thoughts on that? You think tennis teaching is getting better or getting worse?
No, I absolutely think it's getting worse. I think, so many teaching pros come to tennis because they played the juniors, they played college, maybe they played some minor, some futures events. They can't go any further, and now what do? They don't come to tennis because they love to teach tennis. They love to play tennis, but they come to teach tennis because what else are they going to do? And along the way, the information that they got, the information that got them where they are is the information that kept them where they are in most cases. And then they come back to tennis to teach, and they give that same information. And they're probably not working with an athlete, a kid or an adult who's a great athlete. And there's no way that the player can do what they're being asked. And most pros on the tour, they don't even do what they're taught. You listen to Serena's coach, Patrick, his name.
Money Gulu.
Yeah.
Mortigolo. I get a little trouble. Money Gulu.
Yeah. No, I get it. And you listen to how he teaches. And then you go and look at how Serena hits the ball. And you go, there is no information that he's giving that applies to how Serena hits the ball. He needs to be teaching how Serena hits the ball. And it just doesn't happen. So
I'll tell you a funny story. I was at his school in France, not the new place, but he had a place closer to Paris years ago. And he said I was too much about math and tennis is art. And, it is both. It is both a science and an art. So there was a girl, I should be able to tell you her name, or she was top 60 in the world. And I said, I'll pull this off. I didn't say that to her. I said, let me do this. And I just went over and said to the coach, hey, let me just feed a few tennis balls. And I had one of the juniors go first. And, it was a cross-court forehand, downline approach shot. He got hit a volley. And, of course, the volley, we had to had the volley being hit cross-court, teach the angle. Actually, to teach technique, you're better off for a long time just have people hit the volley down the line. That's something that Andy added to the tiebreaker test. And that's where you just hang in there. Everybody adds little ideas and you just keep tweaking it. But anyway, so the gal comes in, she bangs her ground stroke. She bangs her approach shot. And of course, I bang the feeds. I'm giving it my best Harry Hopman, Robert Lansdorp feed and just pound the ball to her forehand volley. And then we do that 3 times. And I go, okay, 3 more. Let's go backhand side. And sure enough, she rips her ground stroke. She rips her approach shot. And I just pound the ball at the backhand volley. And I said, see, Patrick, and it was the language, it was a French player. And I said, Patrick, she's not going to pass the tiebreaker test. She's going to play 1-up, 1-back doubles. And Patrick's, he's a clever marketer. I mean, for years, what are you helping Serena with? Well, we're really focusing on her serve. And but yeah, I think years ago, that's one negative of the internet is people think they can learn. I guess you can learn almost anything by going to YouTube. But one thing I don't think that you can learn is tennis. I mean, if you got the heads up, online tennis instruction, Florian Meyer and Greg Lesueur, Jeff Luce has done very little with them, but Jeff actually of those 3. I mean, Florian had a few telephone calls, Greg Lesueur maybe a full week, and then Jeff was definitely under, maybe I couldn't say Vic's tutelage because he wasn't that active, but he was in California on the neighborhood courts, Cote de Casa. But those are 2 outfits that do a pretty good job, and I think you can certainly learn this and that. Pronounce his name the right way, Jorge Capistrani.
Yep.
He does a great job with drills. And so, I mean, I don't want to be doom and gloom and throw people under the bus, but I mean, it is the wild, wild west and anything goes and water runs downhill and tennis courts are circular. And it's a FUBAR, that military term. Everybody knows what F stands for. F'd up beyond all recognition, F'd up beyond all repair. And it's really criminal to be giving a kid bad information. Vandermeer, come back and talked about some of these other pillars. Vandermeer was so emphatic about telling people can replace money, but they can't replace time. It's one thing that's, now $100 is a magic number. It's $100 for an hour. And, that $100 can come and go and you can make another $100. But if someone takes a bad lesson, Welby Van Horn used to say that the bargain hunters that, the cheap lesson is so expensive. Well, we'll take this lesson. It doesn't cost as much. And years ago, it was really interesting is that everybody charged the same amount of money. Pros didn't have these different fees. I think you have to give Nick Bollettieri credit for that, where it was kind of like there was just one type of blue jeans, Wrangler, and then there's Levi's, and then there's designer jeans. And, pretty soon, I got to take a lesson from this expert and it costs X amount of money. But I do think with resource with Braden is, obviously you spent time one-on-one with Vic, but you really learned, certainly you and your staff have used the books and the tapes and this and that, but you basically were taught the Vic Braden method at Tennis Tech.
Correct.
And then you taught Ryan Reedy the Vic Braden, information, if you will. And that's one thing to hats off to Ryan Reedy is that's 3rd generation. That just proves how strong a resource it is. So it's not like you had to work for Vic the man. Well, yeah, I work for Vic. And I think that's a problem too, is that now a lot of times coaches are not even going to conferences. Now I know they have these, there's one coming up. Ryan's part of it. I think it's Con.
Right. Yep.
I don't know the full name of it is, but And, that's great. Okay, there's, 40 people, 40 experts around the world, and they're going to share 1 hour. You're better off if you could, someone if they wanted to, and that's something I could ask you. At your facility, people should come there to learn. You should have teaching pros coming and paying you a nominal fee to come and observe your program. Does that happen? Do people come in and want to observe what you're doing?
No, we don't have that.
Yeah.
Great idea, but no.
Go ahead.
You made the point earlier that it's criminal what's happening. I'm kind of surprised over the years that when a parent comes to find out that the $10,000 they just spent for their child to learn tennis, and they come to find out that information was misinformation. It was basically malpractice. I'm really surprised that we have never seen, or maybe it's out there and I don't know about it, a parent who just gets a lawyer and goes, yeah, I'm going to sue for malpractice. Because I found out that what you're teaching my kid for the last 2 years at $10,000 or plus, it was actually wrong. I'm surprised that has not happened.
Well, one thing about suing pros, a lot of pros don't have any money. But I one time had a pro from New England. He brought a kid down. He's top 10 in New England, and he's a senior in high school. And they asked to have a video made. And it's like, are you sure? So I make the video, and the father, rightfully so, he took his keys and he just slammed them down on the desk. And you go, why am I finding this out now?
I've experienced the same thing. Absolutely.
You should, that should happen more often. In that sense, there's no accountability, but, I think, well, you go see a dentist, you go see a doctor, you think, okay, they have the credentials, okay. But they've gone to school. Someone to be a doctor, I always ask doctors, how old were you when you got your first significant paycheck? And they, 33, 35, 37. But that's the thing about tennis, less and less coaches are even certified. And, I was a tester, and, I think it's true. Certification is not education. But to be mentored, then who's going to be mentoring you? And, like the USPTA, it's great. Okay, they got a mentorship program. But what common denominators do the people who are running that? Okay, what qualifies someone to be a mentor? What qualifies someone to be a master pro?
Usually a clipboard.
Well, I think now with the USPTA, I could be wrong, but there's a program on how to become a USPTA pro. And there's only X amount of people who are master pros with the PTR and the USPTA. And, if you've written articles or if you've developed tournament players and what have you. And that doesn't necessarily make you a master. I think that, coming back to the pillars, with Ryan Reedy, for example, the other day I was sent a film that he made on Alcaraz. I just get so many things sent to me, and it was very good. But he'll teach some things that are not like. And Andy Fitzell is very protective of Vic Braden, and he'll see things, and like Andy would say, I don't want to speak for Andy, but like the Power X, Braden was not one to say the Power X, and that comes from Don Leary. It's word picture method, and then we put images to it, and it doesn't need to be where it becomes picky, but I do think the reason to mention this is that some people listen to this podcast and just think it's hero worship. They have Vic up on a pedestal, and it couldn't be anything further from the truth. But so whether it's one time was in New York speaking at the Tennis Future Conference, and Craig Tiley gave a presentation, and I sat and watched it with Sammy Garcia, who went to Tennis Tech. He's a pro in Vero Beach, and Craig gave pretty much a combination of Welby Van Horn, because he started with a balance, hands on your hips, 3/8 system of balance. He had these little kids on the court. And, he used some Vandermeer progressions, but the overriding control factor was he had Braden information.
Sure.
You're going to let the racket close, and when the racket face closes, then and only then can you truly swing inside out. So, that's one thing, is that when people listen to you and I talk, we think they think hero worship, or we're very one-dimensional. It's just Braden, Braden, Braden. In our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, we mentioned over 100 coaches. With the tape on Alcaraz, and I think it's salesmanship. Talk to Ryan, tell him to listen to the podcast, give me a call, is that when he says, well, Alcaraz opens up his front shoulder, the Bradenites would look at that and go, you don't want to do that. You want to try to stay over the ball and not have the body lead and pull out to the opposite side. But there's always so many ins and outs to why there's subtleties and nuances from one player to the next. But the core information, it's really sad. This certainly wouldn't happen at your club, where you have the blind leading the blind, where the people who need the best instruction, the little kids, are being taught by maybe the kid who's a high school player who's got a really outgoing personality. But you're at your place. I mean, you have to have quality instruction from day one. Day one. With what else you want to share with our listeners?
Steve, we've talked about so much. I think my well is empty.
Your well is empty. I could ask you some questions with doubles. I mean, with your club players, you have them going to the net?
So with our adults, they are encouraged to. It can be difficult, but we encourage them to. We practice it. But when they get into match situations, especially if they're lesser experienced players, they run to the net, they get lobbed, and they go, why am I at the net? So I understand that. With our juniors, absolutely. We have a rule that if you don't serve and volley first and second, if you're an advanced tournament prep player, you automatically lose the game. If you're a tournament prep player, we're not quite as tough on you. If you don't serve and volley first and second, you lose the point. Automatic loss of point. So, we are always encouraging the players going forward.
Yeah, around the country, around the world for that matter, people do that drill. Feed and approach shot, two players on each side, two players on one side, two players only. Then you have like 6 or 8 on the other side, and they come in pairs, and they come in off the approach shot, they win, they tag up to the baseline. Then they come in off the volley, they win that, they tag up the baseline, then they get a lob fed, they win that, then they run to the other side. I mean, I know some college teams that do that as a warm-up. Mm-hmm. And it's a great drill, but really, it's a great drill if you've been taught how to hit a volley. It's a great drill if you've been taught how to hit an overhead. And it's just you got to go back and so it's be happy at a tennis club. A lot of times kids, okay, you're gonna be happy Monday through Friday because you're doing these fun drills, but then when you go to the weekend, you play a tournament, you're not going to be too happy. I think that a group of tennis teachers, if we could. We have a large alumni, a lot of associates. The GreatBase has been approved as a nonprofit. It just took place September 1st. We're at ground level. Thanks. So we're at ground level 0 with that. But if we could just have people, 15 minutes a day, we're going to play one bounce doubles. We do it most of the time where you can't poach. All 4 players come to the net. And, that there's so many lost arts. Where doubles, it's just Vic Braden, it's a fantastic adventure. Well, yeah, it is. The adventure is to go 39 feet forward. You don't have to go all 39, but if you'd go pretty close to that net and have some fun. If you were to give some advice to the USTA, governing body of tennis, or USPTA, PTR, 1, 2, 3, what are the first 3 things that come to your mind?
I wrote a letter to the former president of the USTA once, recommending you as being put in charge of junior development, all of junior development. So that would be the first thing I would say. They need to contact you and get their egos in check. Tennis, we're such a huge country, so many players, and how many players do we really have in the top 50 that matter? So, yes, I think you should be the head of junior development. That would be one. That might be my 1, 2, and 3. I think Vic's information needs to be, put out there, readily available. If you're a USPTA, I get it. The PTR is not going to do that because of Vandermeer's, affiliation. But we are just, as I said earlier, I think the wrong people are in charge. We always want to put the players in charge of development. And the players are just awful. If we could put the scientists in charge and have the players see balls and hit with the kids, that would be fine. But the wrong people are in charge. And they're just repeating the same crazy cycle over and over again. As everybody knows, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. I think the USTA and the USPTA are insane.
Yeah, it's flattering. I mean, obviously, I've been told that by many people. Certainly, I'm not a scientist, not an artist, but a craftsman. And basically, we have a system of systems. Carl Hale says it quite well. He runs the Canadian Open. I've met him through Richard Hernandez and spent time with Carl. And that, it's all about working with marquee players, But Vic used to say, you go and visit a program, how the kid who puts the ice cream cone in their forehead, how do they hit the ball? Judge the program by the worst athlete in the program.
I tell parents that all the time. Every program has their great players. So look at the great players. Look at the players who are not the great athletes and see how they hit the ball. Now you know if this program can teach.
Yeah. Jeff Lewis put this together. I've shared it on our podcast. And one thing with our podcast, we're not trying to be a magazine where we're just interviewing famous people like so many podcasts. And I think it's fun to listen to the touring pros and the trainers of the touring pros and the coaches of the touring pros. But I was in a room, one of the smartest things I did is I followed my brother's advice is just hang out with people who know a lot more than you. But I was in many situations with Vic where certainly I had to start answering questions. But Jeff set this clinic up where Vic went first and I went second. And I said, well, this is what we do. And Vic, nice guy Vic, the psychologist, he'd say in the back room, that kid's game, that kid's got no game. He's lucky to find the bathroom. And what we do is we skill test people. And, we have a few players here right now. We put them through the skills test and, you got to hit, can you hit your volley? I'm going to feed it 30 miles per hour. Can you hit it in the service box? And, so you use the quadrant training and, they're 0707. So I think to be clever, I think that if we had posters of the very best players, and that's one thing that's going on with YouTube is people are mistaking the recovery as the follow through. The follow through has gone away. People don't even teach the follow through anymore. And it's just like, all right, I said that might work. That forehand might work if it's the path of a snake going down a hole. That forehand might work if that's how you're going to throw a discus and end up, no center of gravity, way off balance. But I think if we had a form tournament for younger players, the beginning players, and they had to just demonstrate form, and there was prizes for that, that comes from all the different ideas, like say a Vandermeer, the fake golden medallion, is let's just have a form tournament, and then also let's have a target tournament. And the target tournament is not a matter of, Mark Wolpole said this, another tennis techer, is that not everybody starts even. You're going to have somebody who's, bigger, stronger, more athletic. Their parents, the kids got miles on their legs and they've played sports. And I think that we're judging the wrong thing. At a really early age, we're judging who's winning. You got two kids with palm-up serves and, they're running back to the fence and climbing up the fence. And, the parents are on the sidelines and like who's going to win? No one's going to win. They're actually losing. They're losing time, and it's just it's unfortunate. It's such a huge negative dark cloud. But no, I think our listeners, especially club owners, program directors, to hear what you're saying or what you've accomplished. Again, I thank you for knocking on doors and being persistent to get Vic's name into the Hall of Fame. That was huge. I think that sharing this time with our listeners that to get pros on the same page, there has to be continuity from one court to the next.
That's it. Yep.
And generally there's not. You can go to a tennis club and you can have 6 pros on 6 side-by-side courts, and they're all teaching something different. But I do think we have the merchant of flesh scenarios that some people just have a gift with jockocracy. In other words, how do you talk to athletes? And I've trained a lot of really excellent tennis teachers that are not very good at jockocracy. How do you talk to someone who thinks they're so much better than they are? And, sometimes that teenage boy, they don't know until it's way too late. They don't know they've got holes in their game, and, they keep going and going and going, and they just don't fix the holes in their boat fast enough. How do people get a hold of you? They want to send you an email and talk to you or contact you. I know you're busy, but if people want to observe your program.
No, that would be great. I would easily, they can go on our website, doylestowntennis.com. The phone number's there. Have them leave me a message, and I would definitely get back to them. Would enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I think we have to keep working. I think our podcasts, I don't know. I'm not even, I don't even have the skill to know how to check and see how many people are listening to it. But I do get a lot of positive feedback about the podcast, and people like the longevity. The Instagram is a different format, for example, but people would benefit so much by listening to what you've had to say tonight, but also what you and your staff are doing. I think what's happened years ago, I understand in college tennis, is development versus recruitment. You're like 100% in developmental tennis, correct?
Correct.
It's not like people aren't going to go to a smaller town north of Philadelphia. People find their way to Florida. I think Nick Bollettieri no one's met as many families as Nick Bollettieri. People who say, okay, we're serious. We want to step up the plate. Our kid wants to become a tennis player. We'll do whatever it takes. And, now that's just so different than it used to be where, okay, the kid's going to homeschool. The parents are going to find a way for them to be in the sunshine, get more court time, be on clay courts. Here in Florida, it's not like we have better tennis instruction. We just have more of it.
Right.
And we have players that are feeding off of players. Like say with what Nick accomplished, he got in the Hall of Fame based on his program became the toughest playground in tennis. So he really, rightfully so, he's in the Hall of Fame based on the environment that he created.
And so many parents...
Go ahead.
So many parents are enamored by the environment. Not the information, not the education, the environment.
Yeah. No, we have a coach out in Arkansas who's very dedicated, Cole Reeves. Just one player in particular, I think, that he's sent to me just once, maybe twice. But then she was at Dave Anderson's, and she okay, this girl's got the best technique. This girl is like, okay, that's so clean. That's so clean, and with but that's where you can take the skills test, brawn versus brain. Say you got a 14-year-old boy he's doing excellent on the skills test. And he plays an 18-year-old boy, and the 18-year-old boy wins. But the 14-year-old boy still has better skills. And people just don't understand that. I think my ice hockey background, if you can't skate, you can't play. And, I know nothing about swimming. Went to a high school where you had to swim a mile to graduate. My mother was emphatic about us taking this course in this cold, cold lake, and I think it was called junior life saving. But I know nothing about swimming, but I can look and tell if someone can't swim. And, I think that's where anything goes. Dave Secker mentioned, being in Prague, I believe, exactly what city he was in. But, some places you go and technique is just accepted, where you're not you're not judged. Does the pro make the place or the place make the pro? Somebody's teaching at a park and rec, they're not a very good coach. But if they're working at such and such academy and they surround themselves with, some juniors who can hit the ball, it's just baffling. It's just baffling. But Jim, it's been great to have you on.
I've enjoyed it.
It's amazing to think how many years have gone by. We need to have a reunion. One year we tried it at the U.S. Open, but that was a bad idea because people are staying all over the city and people are watching matches late at night. But I do think that time to circle the wagons and try to, people should just know, where to go and how to get better. And it shouldn't be that expensive. But again, coming back to Daniel Coyle, for what you've been doing for a lifetime, people in your area, it's amazing. Canadians, for example, people in your area should come check out what you do. Used to sit down in video analysis. Years ago in Canada, we always said the Canadians had a superiority complex in hockey. And in tennis, they had an inferiority complex. But now Canadians feel like, oh, we don't need to go to Florida. We don't need to go to Barcelona. Vic used to say the best tennis teacher might be somebody who's teaching tennis in their basement. Are you getting the kid to have very simple, efficient strokes? But anyway, anything you want to sign off with? It's time for me to shut up.
No. I'm good. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Yeah, and thanks again. Jim Klein, Doylestown Tennis Club. You know how to get in touch with him. But Jim, thanks for your time, and you've nailed it with a lot of great points for everybody. Adios.
Steve,
I'll follow up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Okay, our listeners. Like boom, boom, boom. I think Jim Klein has the ability to go boom, boom, boom. This is what needs to happen. But there was certainly a lot of comments for players, for parents, and for pros. And again, unfortunately, too many tennis teaching pros are not well read. But I think if you could find it, I would go for the Vic Braden book, Teaching Children the Vic Braden Way. You can find it. It should be reproduced. And I do think Ryan Reedy, with his 2-minute program, I think with some of the Instagram posts, I'm not sure how many there are that Andy Fitzell put together. You don't need to have a 2-hour format like this podcast or a 3-hour format or in between to show me how to hit it. Vic Braden, tennis racket. How do I hang on to a racket? How do I hang on to it? And the sooner the better. You just don't want a kid to go, and they go. A year goes by, 2 years goes by, and just the fact, like say for example, young kids hanging on to the racket with a Western grip. That's a conducive to a high bouncing ball. That's the little kid grip. Most kids, if you looked at our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, they're better off to hit a two-handed forehand. They're stronger with two hands. They can use a conventional grip, Eastern grip. It's easier for a kid with two hands to hold the racket up high, keep it in sync with the body. But if a kid goes down the road, and for us, it's not just the Western grip, it's the wrist position, elbow position, and it's almost like the butt of the racket's hitting her earlobe. So it's the unlearning, it's the deprogramming, reprogramming. So the sooner the better someone gets off to a good start. And, I think also too, one thing for parents is I don't think tennis parents want to be the parent who's climbing the fence. I've told parents, well, you could be the parent that's furthest from the fence. So I do think that a lot of tennis parents are like, well, I don't want to be the teacher. I don't want to be the coach. Well, learn tennis together, especially in the early years. Set a ball on a cone and learn how to hit a ball off a cone. And, but that's what really needs to be done is we need to have players who enter our sport, young players, because the demographics, Javier Palenque was on our podcast as a guest. People go back and listen to that. the demographics, we have a lot of old people that play tennis, but we need to get young, new people coming into the game. And then also with tennis teachers, that's one thing that we do. I think that's perhaps number one for us is peer teaching. Doubles learning. It can really help reduce costs, but you want to be able to have kids, kids by kids for kids, have kids be able to teach kids. In the end, Braden, with information, teaching is information transfer. So what is the information? Okay, body balance, grip swing body, it's just a matter of logic. But anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks, Jim Klein. That's a podcast. It's in the books, and I think that was excellent. We'll have to talk to Jim again. Thank you.